Let's get into our first topic. Should all police be armed? Scotland Yard have conducted an internal safety review in 2022 after 2 officers were attacked with knives. The review said that the Metropolitan Police should consider arming officers with semi-automatic pistols. Now, currently guns are only given to highly trained officers in specialist firearms units. They're deployed to the most dangerous incidents or high-profile events. Frontline officers can carry tasers, they can have batons, and they can have pepper spray. But assaults on police are increasing. Over the weekend, 26 officers were injured, 4 of them seriously, during the protests organised by Tommy Robinson. Reem, what are your thoughts of that? Is it time to arm police officers with handguns? A lot of them have got tasers. Now we're talking about semi-automatic weapons.
Yes, I think so. And I think I'd feel a lot safer if we had more police officers, but also that they were able to arm themselves specifically. I think part of the problem at the moment is we see so many times, so many videos online of police officers being completely unable to defend themselves. And actually, when you do have a larger person that is an offender and they are attacking police officers, a baton does not do anything. You are not able to actually disarm that person. And when we're talking about deadly knife attacks, where people are going around with, huge weapons, the only way to disarm that person is if you're able to shoot them in the leg. Now, I do think that there has to be a bit of a difference here. So one thing that happened around 2020 when the Black Lives Matter protests started was a conversation about policing in comparison to the UK and the US. And in the US and the UK, we have basically the same amount of training that's being used. But because in the US, they all have guns, the training, a lot of that time is being used for how to actually use the gun, rather than things in the UK like de-escalation. So I think it would be really important that guns are being used in very, very rare occasions where those police officers genuinely feel fear for their own lives and fear for the lives of the public, where they're unable to do so in other means. They should be able to de-escalate in other means. However, when it gets to that stage, they absolutely should be able to use a gun when necessary.
OK. Matthew, how do you feel?
First of all, there's several reasons why I think this would be a bad idea. The police themselves don't want it. The Police Federation have said over numerous years, look, we don't want our officers to have these sort of weapons. I think there is a reason you've got to be specifically trained. I think you've got to be a certain type of person that's prepared to use that weapon in the most desperate of cases. And we've seen in many cases in recent years where it's gone wrong. I think in this country we tend to police by consent, and de-escalation is a good thing. And also, I'm all for evidence-based policy. I've struggled to find, other than the tragic case of PC Keith Palmer during the terrorist attack of Parliament in 2017, to find any case where a copper has been killed through stabbing. I think there are better ways of doing things. And if we're going to really normalise sort of a militarised way of policing in this country, and every single call out a copper goes to, they have a gun, potentially in an enclosed environment, somebody's home, somebody's flat, domestic abuse, whatever else, and you've got a gun, I think we're treading very dangerous ground.
Well, they could also leave the gun in the car if they're going into a home for domestic abuse. I mean, that's a different issue. But there is also the fundamental point here that if a police officer is unable to protect themselves, how many times have we seen, and I hate to say it, but I've seen so much of this on social media, young, very small women that are being physically hurt by these very, very large male criminals. They are not able to defend themselves because women are physically weaker than men. And so they are unable to do that within that first instance. If they have a gun, they will be able to equalise their power.
So who are you saying? Are you talking about female police officers?
Yes.
Right, just to clarify. There is, I mean, looking at the data, let's just look at the data. Homicides have decreased by 6%. Offences involving knife or sharp instruments have decreased by 1%. Firearms incidents have decreased by 21%. I mean, crime is falling. Are you worried that this might be an overreaction? The police unions are saying we don't want handguns, but they are all for increasing the number of tasers that are out there. Why are tasers, which in the most cases can be non-lethal, but they can incapacitate criminals, Every now and then you might get someone who is not going to be incapacitated by them, but in the majority they work. Why wouldn't you support the use of tasers over the support of weapons that are going to kill people?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question. I think that tasers should absolutely be used as a first precaution in that particular instance. But we're talking about the very, very rare cases. And that's why, I mean, Matthew mentioned this earlier, this de-escalation is really important. But I think that for a female police officer, for example, who isn't able to physically match a grown man, I think them being able to protect themselves with a gun is really important.
So just briefly, one word answer from both of you, because I want to go to the calls. Are the troubles that we saw this weekend, where 26 police officers were hurt, 3 or 4 of them very seriously, do you think it would have been better for the police to have had guns?
I do think that they should have used guns in that. I mean, when it's a large protest where there are huge amounts of people, I think that would have been inappropriate. However, if they had a gun, sorry, this isn't one word answer. If they had a gun, it might have been better.
If a gun was discharged with that sort of crowd, you're asking for chaos, unfortunately. And that's why I think it would have been a bad idea.
All right, let's speak to Trevor, who's in Bournemouth. Trevor, do you think all police officers should be armed?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Well, for a simple reason, to carry a firearm, you have to be trained.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm ex-military.
Yeah.
I've been trained to use a firearm, and I know what I'm doing with a firearm. I look at the police today, and to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't trust any of them with a firearm, because I don't think they know how to use one. We have a special. We have
we've got the armed police units. Yeah, there's about just over 6,000 of them.
Well, they are trained to use a firearm. They know what to do and when to do it.
But no one's saying, Trevor, that you're just going to hand people handguns on their way out of the police station. You are going to train them to use them. Thing is, would you feel safer if you knew that police in this country were armed?
No, not at all. I think personally, not every police officer, they have a taser. I think that's sufficient enough to detain someone.
All right, Matthew.
Can I just ask Trevor, this will be really interesting. As a former copper, if
he was a former military.
Sorry, former military. What would you give the police if they feel unsafe at the moment, coming from that similar sort of background?
I think, as it stands at the moment, they have a taser which is at their use, which is acceptable. It's not going to kill someone. The trouble is, if you start arming everyday coppers with a sidearm or a firearm, I'd be worried because I think they might panic, draw their firearm and shoot someone.
Okay, Trevor, I'll leave it there. Thank you for kicking us off. Graham's in Glasgow. Graeme, welcome to the show. Would you like to see the police armed in this country?
It wouldn't bother me either way. So long as they're trained properly and they understand that if they pull that weapon out and fire it and somebody's hurt, they get charged. If they kill somebody, they're charged with murder. I mean, the police in Northern Ireland have had them for decades now. I've run about the streets of Northern Ireland with a rifle. I've been in riots and I've not had me to use a weapon.
I mean,
I don't see a problem with the police doing it.
Right. I mean, would you worry, Graeme, that if in a sense you're escalating things, so if you're arming the police, what do you think criminals are going to be doing? Are they going to take that step up and try and get hold of illegal firearms?
They're already armed.
Well, yeah, but
that's the thing with guns being illegal, is that criminals already get their hands on them.
But are you going to make the situation worse by putting more guns into the community by arming the police? Is a question. Graeme, what do you think?
I don't think that matters. If somebody wants to arm themselves and commit a crime, they're going to do it.
Okay,
if the
Graeme,
police have
thank
got
you.
weapons, they're not going to bother about it. You're not going to pull a weapon out and fire it if you're not going to get charged with murder.
Okay, Graeme, thank you. Let's move on to Diane, who's in Northumberland. Diane, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts? Do you think police should be armed?
Definitely. Because all these criminals are armed now. They've got guns, knives, machetes.
Well, they're not armed, though. I mean, when we say this... Well, hang on. Then in that case, why are firearms offences decreased by 20%.
Right, but they absolutely are already able to access firearms. You're saying that
But they're going down.
Yes, they're going down, but they still exist in the black market. I mean, firearms still currently exist in the black market. If you're a criminal...
So by arming every police officer, aren't you just going to increase those firearms offences, because the criminals are also going to rearm themselves? Those offences are going down.
The offences are going down. You're absolutely right. Violent crime is reducing, but firearms absolutely exist in the black market.
Sure.
The problem is...
So do knives, but those incidents are going down because policing has been done to de-escalate.
They still exist, and this is the problem. When you make guns illegal, I would support the legalisation of guns, by the way.
You're going to support the legalisation
and I will tell you why. Because when you make these guns illegal, you are taking them away from good people and you are putting them in the hands of criminals. The problem is, in this country, what we have is we have a situation in which criminals are rewarded for what they're doing and good people are not able to protect themselves.
Right, Matthew.
I think there's a very good reason why we don't have a gun crime issue in the same way America does, and that's because we had an awful situation in Scotland of which we all decided collectively we're not having guns anymore. I think guns
talking about Dunblane.
Yes, absolutely. I think guns have always existed in the black market, and that's fine. To use the previous caller's example, I don't want to turn into Northern Ireland, where you essentially have armed conflict and that is normalised. I think that would make us a much unsafer place to be.
OK, thank you, Diane. Squeeze in Roger, who's waiting to speak to us from Derbyshire. Roger, welcome to the show. Do you think police officers should be armed? Do you agree with Reem? Do you think we need to legalise firearms in this country?
No, I don't agree. I was a former carrier in Derbyshire Force till I retired for a period of 12 months. And during a training exercise, I made a mistake, which led me to hand in the firearm and say, I'm not doing it anymore, I might make a mistake. The argument for me is that every time a police officer uses a firearm, he or she is hung out to dry.
Yeah.
They're removed from duties. They're not allowed to be spoken to. The families suffer, they suffer, and they probably never go back to work as a police officer again. I believe that tasers are possibly the way forward, other than the police officers that expressively wish to carry a firearm, who do carry them at present, and they are obviously very competent. It's very, very difficult.
And Roger, what are your thoughts about legalising firearms? Reem said you're going to have to put firearms to the hands of good people rather than allowing just the bad people to have them. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't wish for a legalisation of firearms. Firearms are difficult to get hold of, even for criminals. They manage to get hold of them, but if we legalise them, it would be an open book.
What if we're in a situation in which a criminal pulls out a gun to a police officer? The police officer cannot do anything in response.
If the police officer is carrying a firearm when the person puts a gun to his head, then the police officer can shoot that person.
So the police officer should...
Oh, well, let him answer.
Well, so what Roger is saying is that the police officer should be able to have a gun.
The police officer, if he's an authorised firearms carrier, should be allowed to react to that situation, and if he's in fear of his life, he should be able to shoot that person dead, if necessary, to save his own life or the life of other members of the public.
That's why all
I have to bring this to a close. Roger, thank you. We've run out of time, but thank you for your calls on that. Really good to hear from you, Roger, with your lived experience.